In the beginning, it was all dark, nothing stirred in this lonely space. The waters were deep, the abyss lay waiting. Silently breathing, the eternal night lay for all time. Before the gods, before the earth. Deep within the void, the dreamer lay dreaming. Unconscious of its existence. Sleeping to itself. In the beginning, before all time, before anything had yet come to be, the universal dreamer, the source, lay, nestled in the darkness of the void. Within its dream, there were movements and patterns that were exquisite to the eye and ear. As it dreamed, something began to stir deep within itself. The universal dreamer felt, for the first time, a feeling that it had never experienced before. It wanted to know more of this feeling, it desired to know of itself. With this new realization, came the first desire. This desire ignited the universal dreamer, sparking the very beginnings of creation. This feeling gave it the urge, the push, the desire to be. From this creative push, a new being was born. She. Pure female force. The goddess. Expressing herself through a wave of emotion. Emerging from the void itself, the goddess was born. Exploding with force and power, her body began creating the physical. She was to become the goddess of the universe of form. She spiraled around, and through her dance, many stars and planets were born. Within her gown of heavenly night, many stars shone like pearls on a dark seabed. The universal dreamer watched, as the ecstatic goddess, orgasmic ally ventured out into the darkness. The birth of the goddess from the void was the process of the transformation of invisible energy, the void, into all fundamental physical matter. Imagine, if you will, a void, a dark space, and from this void, a being is born. To create something from nothing is a cosmic paradox. Just as life appeared from nowhere, the goddess birthed herself and then went on to birth the entire universe. This is how everything was first formed. The stars, planets and everything else, including humans, were brought into being through this process. The matter had been transformed, created, from pure energy, literally out of nothing, the void. What was, then, to follow was an orderly development of the stars, the galaxies, and the earth. From the chasm, the abyss, the black gulf. She was born. When above, the heavens had not been formed. When the earth below had no name. Tiamat brought forth them both. Tiamat, mother of the gods, creator of all. The goddess moved her body through the deep folds of the void, creating ripples in the nigel, the nothing. Within the folds, new movements were created, movements that would later become the cosmic cycles of the galaxies and planets. Within her dance, she divided the heavens from the earth, and the day from the night. I am the cosmic mother. I was there at the birth of the universe. I was the womb of the void from whence all came. Birthed from the void itself I, through my desire, became the mother of all. From my body, all was born into creation. Deep inside of myself, I could feel the light of the source, warm and bright. I was not alone, I could feel the whole of creation. I could feel the stars as they span in the night sky. I could feel the hearts and minds of 1,000 different beings that inhabited the growing universe. In all the great cycles of spirals, I was present. I watched the rise and fall of mighty stars. I watched the birth of new consciousness, new systems and new beings. All was as it should be, all was in harmony. I moved my consciousness into all the new creations around me. Finally, settling in the space that would later become known as Earth. In the infinite moment before all time, the goddess arose from the chaos of the void, birthing herself into creation. Not a single being had been born. Not even herself. Separating the skies from the waters, she moved in spiraling patterns of light. As she danced, her ecstasy began to increase. Deep in herself, she created everything that is in form. Her movements made the wind and air was born. And all began to breathe. Light emanated from her dancing feet, she became like the sun. The stars shone in her hair. Comets moved through her body. Fire was created. The waters rose in tidal wave and river. Water created flow and movement. She brought forth the earth. The shores became her bed, the fertile lands, her womb. The mountains, her full breasts, her streaming hair, the trees and plants. She saw all that was and is yet to be, all was born of her sacred dance. Hanging like a jewel in a star-shot sky, she waited. She was hardly a distinct body of form, more like a heaving mass of creative power and force. She was moved by desire alone. She moved her body in undulating waves of pleasure. She was the goddess of form, the birther of dreams. These dreams were to be realized in the physical world of pattern and form. Waiting in the void, her desire mounted her. The movement increased, the very beginnings of birth were near. From this swirling mass of energy, a creative pattern began to form, inspired by the angels of light, sent by the source itself. Distinct and shapely forms could be seen in the movement of the waters, of the body of the goddess. Earth rose with the impulses, writhing, as mountains began to form. Valleys rose to become mountains, mountains plummeted to become valleys. Through the eons of time, she moved and created and recreated her body over and over again. Her landscape was in constant movement. From her fertile body, she birthed every mountain, every valley, and ripened every seed that would later become the trees and animals. She was the well, the source of all form on the planet called Earth. She was paradise. Over eons of time, the earth began to cool and became more and more solid until the landscape could hold its shape, and the physical body of the goddess began to appear. Mountains could be seen rising up from her body as valleys dived into the crevices that made her womanly curves. Her breasts were full, water ran from mountain streams, cascading over the mountain peaks that formed her nipples. She was in constant movement. Fire burst forth from her body in the form of volcanoes. The earth shook as she birthed herself over and over again. We watched and waited. We called her she who shapes the sacred land. Her passion was fiery, her creativity abundant, her sensuality electrical and alive. We wanted to propagate new life, so we came to Earth. We seeded our thoughts, our designs that we carried from the universal dreamer, from the central sun of this universe, into the body of the goddess. She allowed the life force to flow through her, transforming and creating new life from old. We were amazed and honored to be loved by the goddess. We watched as the forms took shape, at first within the matrix of thought that made up the mind of the goddess. We watched as a giant matrix, resembling a spider's web, began to spread across the whole planet, within and without. We watched, mesmerized, as light began to pulse along the silken threads, looking like a giant brain with its neurons flashing on and off. Information and design was being created, waiting to be born in form through the body of the goddess. We watched, amazed, as the goddess, as Grandmother Spider, began to weave her web of creation. Grandmother Spider, she birthed herself from the void. Working with the power of thought, she dreamed thought into substance. She began to spin. She wove the sacred spiral upon which the whole universe was born. In the vortex, the place where she was born, she began to dance. She took the sacred rattles and 4 sacred bundles out of her pouch. She dreamt herself 4 daughters, 1 black, 1 red, 1 brown, 1 white. She placed one daughter on each bundle and danced and dreamed and thought them alive. Grandmother Spider and her 4 daughters dreamt the earth. When it was ready, the daughters came to Earth to live. They became the mothers of the first human families, and the sacred grandmothers of the 4 directions. A long time passed. Grandmother Spider grew lonely for her children. After wandering the earth, she decided to make a home. She built her lodge in the forest near a meadow where a shaman and his apprentice lived. She and the apprentice became lovers and together they had many children. Eventually, a drought came over the land and there was nothing to eat. Spider-Woman's children were crying because they were hungry. She went to the shaman and his apprentice and said, "You must kill me, so my children will not go hungry." At first, they refused because they had both grown to love her. She wandered around with tears in her eyes looking for something for her children to eat. When she was sure she could find nothing, she insisted, "Kill me. It's the only way I'll ever be happy again." When they finally agreed, she instructed them in how it was to be done. First, they prepared a field by removing the rocks and larger plants. Then, they used their digging sticks to roughen the surface of the soil. Next, they cut Spider-Woman's heart from her chest and planted it to the west of the field. Then, they dragged her body across the field until all the flesh was worn from her bones. Last, they planted her bones in the east of the field. When they were finished, the Thunder Beings came to mourn her passing. Their tears made the land fertile, green and magic. From Spider-Woman's heart grew the first oak tree. It had acorns of many kinds. From Spider-Woman's flesh grew corn of many colors. From Spider-Woman's bones grew the sacred herbs for healing and ritual. Grandmother Spider spun 2 silver strands, one went north to south and the other west to east, that connected the 4 corners of the earth. Her colors, yellow, black, red, and white, represent the color of all peoples and reminds us we all come from the same source. I am the Master Weaver. I am the weaver of the web of fate. I am wisdom, creativity, and divine inspiration. I am a shapeshifter, full of understanding of the patterns of illusion. I am the female energy of the creative force of life. Spider-Woman was the weaver. So, she set up her loom on top of the mountain, took up her shuttle and began to weave. This time, as she wove, whenever one thread crossed another, a living thing appeared. She wove roses, lilies and many other beautiful flowers into this world. She wove fruit trees and nut trees and covered the land in mighty forest. She wove all manner of birds, fish and insects into her web. She wove deer, buffalo, coyotes and all of the animals. And every one of these living things was connected to each other in her weaving. Then, she stopped weaving to look at it. It was very beautiful and very full. Yet, it was not finished. There was still something missing, so she started to weave yet another time. This time, the crossing threads created human beings, men, women and children. And each human being that she wove into her great web was connected to every other, to the other animals, to the plants, trees, flowers, to the mountains, seas, desert, even to the distant stars. Every human being and, indeed, everything that Spider-Woman wove into her great web was interconnected. The weaving of the web is the development of the thoughts and aware consciousness of the goddess of earth. Just like the silken threads of a spider's web, this web of consciousness intersected to incorporate the whole of the planet. Within this matrix, the goddess could design and create forms in which beings of pure energy could incarnate into. Just like neural pathways in the human brain, the goddess created for herself a matrix of energy that was capable of holding thoughts and having inspired ideas of its own. From this matrix of thought, the goddess created many patterns within it that would later become physical forms. The web connected all of life, not only on Earth but, also, all beings that inhabited the universe. The web was made up of highways of light. These highways curled back upon themselves and returned to their original cosmic center. They carried pure information, as light, back to the source. You could call it the universal dreamer's nervous system. These highways connected all of universal expression together in intricate patterns of light that resembled a spider's web. Grandmother Spider weaves the realities of Earth. There are many realities, all going on at the same time. There are parallel realities that provide many and varied experiences, all occurring on Earth at once. The goddess, in her spider form, aligns all the different realities together and allows them to cross over each other. When you are running along in alignment to your own spirit, then you enter the synchronized world of Grandmother Spider. When mathematicians came across fantastic formulas that explained the universe, they were tapping into the energy of Grandmother Spider. Magicians of old knew about the secrets of this realm, for this is the level in which you can perform miracles and magic. Through aligning yourself to this aspect, you can begin to develop the skills needed to consciously create your own reality. In symbolic story, the spider weaves the realities and the fairy tales and all that you, as humans, can imagine. The universal goddess, mother of all, emerged out of her planetary creation. Nucleus like a plant from its seed. She erupted into life in one massive orgasm. She manifested the universal matrix of creation within her body, her form. She became an earthly, creative organism as she birthed into life. As Grandmother Spider, she spun her web, working to the divine blueprint of the source itself. The web extended over the whole sphere. Forms and shapes of beings, yet to be born in form, could clearly be seen as the web became the matrix of the dream time. New forms were birthed in the dream time, new species, and new creations. The universal life creators were now free to create new life forms using this universal matrix that had formed itself as a sentient physical entity. Within this matrix, this spider's web, the goddess became a framework in which to hang other forms and creations upon.